The woman standing before him wasn't who they claimed she was, and Casimir Drăculești knew it the moment she drew breath. He watched from his throne as the girl was paraded into the grand hall of the nocturne court, her olive skin flushed with fear, her dark curls pinned back in an elaborate style that didn't suit her. She wore a gown of deep burgundy velvet, cinched too tight at the waist, borrowed jewels glittering at her throat like a collar. Everything about her screamed impostor, yet the three counselors flanking her looked triumphant, their pale faces alight with calculated satisfaction. "Your Majesty," Counselor Theron announced, his white hair gleaming under the chandeliers, "we present to you the lost heiress of House Everhart. After 23 years, Lady Genevieve Everhart has returned to us." Casimir leaned forward slightly, his silver eyes fixed on the trembling woman. She kept her gaze lowered, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The scent of her fear was intoxicating, her pulse a rapid drumbeat that echoed through the cavernous space. But there was something else beneath it, determination perhaps, or desperation. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice carrying effortlessly across the marble floor. The girl's head snapped up, and for a moment their eyes met. Hers were brown, warm and human, filled with terror but also a spark of defiance that interested him far more than it should. She was pretty in a common way, nothing like the aristocratic beauty the Everhart bloodline was known for. Her features were too soft, her frame too delicate, her entire bearing wrong for someone raised in vampire nobility. "Tell me your name," Casimir said, ignoring the counselors' confused glances at one another. "Genevieve Everhart, Your Majesty." Her voice shook, but she forced the words out clearly enough. "Liar." The word cracked through the hall like a whip. The girl flinched and Counselor Theron stepped forward, his expression darkening. "Your Majesty, I assure you we have verified. You have verified nothing but your own ambitions." Casimir rose from his throne, descending the steps with predatory grace. He was tall even among vampires, his white hair falling past his shoulders, his features sharp and aristocratic. The black suit he wore was perfectly tailored, modern yet somehow timeless, befitting a king who had ruled for 3 centuries. The real Genevieve Everhart had a birthmark on her left shoulder blade, shaped like a crescent moon. It was documented at her christening. He circled the girl slowly, noting how she tried not to tremble, how she held her ground even as every instinct must have been screaming at her to run. When he reached her back, he traced one pale finger along the exposed skin above her gown. She gasped but didn't move. "No mark," he murmured. "So I ask you again, what is your real name?" For a long moment she said nothing. The counselors began to protest, but Casimir silenced them with a raised hand. He wanted to hear what she would say, this brave little fraud who had been dragged into whatever scheme Theron and his allies were orchestrating. "Gwen Ellis," she finally whispered. "My name is Gwen Ellis." The admission sent a ripple through the assembled vampires. Casimir returned to stand before her, studying her face with new interest. She met his gaze now, no longer pretending to be something she wasn't, and he found himself unexpectedly pleased by her honesty. "Did you know you were part of a deception?" Gwen's jaw tightened. "I knew I wasn't who they said I was, but they told me if I didn't cooperate they'd kill my sister." Ah, there it was. Casimir glanced at Theron, whose expression had gone carefully blank. "Is that true, Counselor?" "We merely convinced Miss Ellis that her cooperation would be beneficial to all parties involved, by threatening her family." Casimir's voice dropped to a lethal purr. "You know my laws regarding coercion of humans." "Your Majesty, with respect, the situation required silence." The king's eyes began to glow faintly, silver bleeding to red at the edges. "You brought a human into my court under false pretenses, attempted to manipulate me with a transparent fraud, and violated the blood laws in the process. Give me one reason I shouldn't have you executed where you stand." Theron fell to his knees, followed quickly by the other 2 counselors. "Mercy, Your Majesty. We acted only in the interest of the realm. House Everhart's territories have been without leadership for too long. The human criminals operating in their districts grow bolder by the day. We thought if we could install a figurehead, you thought to install a puppet you could control." Casimir looked down at them with cold disdain. "Did you truly believe I wouldn't see through such an obvious ploy?" "We had to try something," Counselor Lyria burst out, her white hair falling forward to hide her face. "The situation grows dire, Your Majesty. The Everhart territories border the human world. Without proper governance, the treaty is at risk. If we cannot maintain order, the human authorities will—" "I am aware of the situation," Casimir interrupted. He turned his attention back to Gwen, who stood frozen in the middle of this supernatural power struggle. "Miss Ellis, how did they find you?" Gwen took a shaky breath. "I'm a bartender. I work at a club downtown in the Everhart district. They came to me 3 weeks ago, said I looked like someone they'd been searching for. At first I thought they were insane, but then they showed me pictures of the real Genevieve Everhart as a child and she trailed off, shrugging helplessly. I guess there's a resemblance, enough of one that they thought they could use me. And your sister? Emma. She's 17, still in school. They said if I didn't help them, they'd make sure she never made it to graduation. The raw protectiveness in her voice stirred something in Casimir's ancient heart. Family loyalty was something he understood, something he valued. This human girl had walked into the den of predators to save her sibling, knowing full well she might not walk out again. Where is the sister now? He asked. We have her secured, Theron said quickly. As insurance that Miss Ellis would, you took a human child hostage. Casimir's voice had gone very quiet, which every vampire in the room recognized as far more dangerous than shouting. Counselor Theron, you have been a member of my court for 140 years. In that time, I have valued your counsel, your administrative skills, your dedication to vampire law. But this, he gestured at Gwen, at the mess they'd created. This is not merely ambitious, it's reckless, stupid, and cruel. You have endangered the treaty, violated our most sacred laws, and dragged an innocent human into our world without her consent. Your Majesty, please. The girl will be released immediately and compensated for her distress. You will resign from the council, effective tonight. Be grateful I'm allowing you to keep your life. Theron's face went even paler, if such a thing were possible. To be stripped of one's position on the Nocturne Court was a humiliation few vampires survived socially. But he bowed his head, accepting the judgment. The other two will serve as examples, Casimir continued, his gaze sweeping over Lyria and the third counselor, a young vampire named Dorian. 50 years of public service working directly with human-vampire relations in the Everhart territories. Perhaps that will teach you the value of the mortals you so carelessly threatened. Yes, Your Majesty, they murmured in unison. Now get out of my sight, all of you. The three counselors fled, leaving Gwen standing alone before the Vampire King. She swayed slightly and Casimir realized she was close to fainting. He caught her elbow, steadying her with surprising gentleness. Easy, he said, you're safe now. My sister will be brought here within the hour unharmed. You have my word. He guided her toward a chair near his throne, one reserved for honored guests. Sit, you look ready to collapse. Gwen sank into the chair gratefully, her legs finally giving out. I don't understand. Why did you help me? I lied to you. Well, not exactly lied, but I came here pretending to be someone I'm not. You came here under duress to protect your family. There's no dishonor in that. Casimir settled back onto his throne, studying her with open curiosity. Besides, did you truly think you were fooling anyone? You walked in here looking like you were being led to your execution. Despite everything, Gwen let out a breathless laugh. I kind of was, wasn't I? They told me if I could convince you I was the heiress, they'd let Emma go and pay us both enough money to move away, start fresh somewhere safe. But if I failed, she shuddered. They weren't specific about what would happen, but I got the impression it wouldn't be pleasant. They would have killed you both, Casimir said bluntly. Loose ends are dangerous in vampire politics. The moment you ceased to be useful, they would have ensured your silence permanently. The color drained from Gwen's face. Oh God, but that won't happen now. He leaned forward, his silver eyes intense. You have my protection, Miss Ellis, both you and your sister. No one in this court will touch you. Why? The question burst out of her. Why would you protect me? You don't know me. I'm nobody, just a bartender from the wrong side of the city who got caught up in something way over her head. Casimir was silent for a moment, considering his answer. The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure himself. Perhaps it was her courage in the face of overwhelming danger. Perhaps it was the way she'd chosen honesty when a lie might have saved her. Or perhaps it was simply that he was tired of the endless political machinations, the constant scheming and betrayal that came with being king, and this mortal girl represented something refreshingly genuine. Let's just say I appreciate integrity, he finally said. It's a rare quality even among my own kind. Before Gwen could respond, the great doors opened again, and two guards entered with a struggling teenage girl between them. Emma Ellis was smaller than her sister, with the same dark curls but lighter eyes, green instead of brown. She was fighting the guards with admirable determination despite the futility of it. Emma, Gwen shot to her feet, rushing forward. Gwen, oh my God, are you okay? They said I had to come here, but they wouldn't tell me what was. Emma's words died as she caught sight of Casimir on his throne. Her eyes went wide. Holy shit, he's really a vampire. Language, Gwen said automatically, pulling her sister into a fierce embrace. You're okay? They didn't hurt you? No, just scared the hell out of me. What's going on? Casimir rose and dismissed the guards with a gesture. Your sister was coerced into participating in a political scheme that has now been resolved. You're both free to go. with my apologies for the trauma you've endured. Emma looked between Gwen and the Vampire King, clearly trying to process everything. Wait, so we're not in trouble? We can just leave? You can, Casimir confirmed. My guards will escort you home and ensure no one bothers you again. Additionally, you'll each receive compensation for your ordeal. Shall we say $50,000 each? Gwen's mouth fell open. That's too much. We can't. You can and you will. Consider it payment for your time and an apology for my court's abhorrent behavior. He turned to one of the remaining guards. See that they're taken home safely. Post protection on their residence for the next month, until I'm certain Theron and his allies won't try anything foolish in revenge. Yes, Your Majesty. As the guard moved to escort them out, Gwen hesitated, looking back at Casimir. Thank you, she said softly. I know you didn't have to do any of this. You could have just killed us all and been done with it. I'm not in the habit of killing innocent humans, Casimir replied, though his lips quirked in something that might have been amusement. It's bad for diplomatic relations. She smiled at that, a real smile that transformed her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. Then she was gone, swept away by the guard along with her sister, leaving Casimir alone in his throne room. He sat in silence for a long while after they left, his mind working through the political implications of what had just occurred. Theron's downfall would create a power vacuum in the council, one that would need to be filled carefully. The Everhart territory situation remained unresolved without proper vampire oversight. The border district would continue to deteriorate, potentially threatening the delicate peace between humans and vampires. And then there was the girl, Gwen Ellis, bartender and unlikely heroine, who had looked him in the eye and told the truth when it could have cost her everything. He found his thoughts returning to her far more often than they should over the next few hours as he dealt with the aftermath of Theron's scheme. It was nearly dawn when his second-in-command, Lucien Voronov, finally entered the throne room. Lucien was old even by vampire standards, nearly 500 years, with the white hair and pale skin of their kind but eyes that held the weight of centuries. I heard there was excitement tonight, Lucien said, settling into the chair Gwen had occupied hours earlier. Theron tried to install a fake heiress? He did more than try. He kidnapped a human child to force her sister into cooperation. Casimir rubbed his temples, feeling the exhaustion of the night catching up with him. I've stripped him of his position. Harsh but fair. What about the human girl? I sent her home. Lucien raised an eyebrow. With guards, I hope. Theron has loyal followers who might see her as a loose end. I'm not a fool, old friend. She and her sister are under my protection. Ah! Something in Lucien's expression shifted, became knowing. She must have been remarkable to earn your personal protection so quickly. She was honest, Casimir said simply. When faced with exposure, she told the truth instead of doubling down on the lie. That takes courage, or desperation, perhaps. But there was something about her. He trailed off, unwilling to examine too closely why Gwen Ellis had made such an impression on him. Regardless, we still have the Everhart problem to solve. The territory needs leadership. Then appoint someone. There are a dozen noble houses that would leap at the chance. And create resentment among the 11 who weren't chosen? No, this requires a more delicate touch. Casimir stood, moving to the tall windows that looked out over the city. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, the first hint of dawn that would drive him to his chambers soon. What do we know about the real Genevieve Everhart, taken by humans during a raid 23 years ago, when she was only a few months old? Her parents were killed in the attack. The assumption has always been that she was killed as well, but the body was never recovered. Could she still be alive? Lucien shrugged. Anything's possible. But if she survived, she'd be fully human by now, raised without any knowledge of her heritage, her vampire bloodline dormant. Even if we found her, what good would she be as a leader? None, Casimir admitted, but her existence would give legitimacy to whoever we place in charge of the territory. A regent, acting on behalf of the true heiress. You want to keep looking for her. I want to solve this problem permanently, not just slap a temporary patch on it. Casimir turned away from the window. Increase the search efforts. If Genevieve Everhart is alive somewhere in the human world, I want her found. As you command, Your Majesty. Lucien rose, preparing to leave. But I have to ask, does this sudden interest in finding the heiress have anything to do with the human girl who looks like her? Casimir's expression remained carefully neutral. Good morning, Lucien. His friend laughed softly as he left, leaving Casimir alone with his thoughts and the approaching dawn. 3 nights later, Casimir found himself doing something he hadn't done in decades, leaving the vampire court to walk among humans. The Everhart territory was a strange hybrid of the mortal and immortal worlds, a district where both populations coexisted under the terms of the century-old treaty. During the day it belonged entirely to humans. But as night fell, the vampires emerged to claim their own spaces, their own businesses, their own society hidden in plain sight. He told himself he was surveying the territory, assessing the security situation firsthand. He did not admit, even to himself, that he was looking for a particular bartender. The club where Gwen worked was called Midnight, a painfully obvious name that nonetheless attracted a mixed crowd of humans and vampires looking for neutral ground. Casimir entered through the back, using his influence to bypass the line and the security. The interior was all dark wood and dim lighting, with a long bar dominating one side and small tables scattered throughout. Music pounded from speakers, not quite loud enough to prevent conversation but enough to create an energetic atmosphere. And there, behind the bar, was Gwen. She moved with practiced efficiency, mixing drinks and chatting with customers as if her entire world hadn't been upended 3 nights ago. Her hair was down tonight, falling in loose waves over her shoulders, and she wore all black simple jeans and a fitted shirt that the club probably required. She was smiling at something a customer said, and once again Casimir was struck by how alive she seemed, how vibrantly human in a way he'd almost forgotten existed. He waited until she had a break in the rush, then approached the bar. Gwen looked up and her eyes went wide with recognition. "Your Majesty, should I bow? I don't actually know the protocol for when the Vampire King shows up at your workplace." "Casimir is fine when we're not in court," he said, sliding onto a stool. "And no bowing required." "Right. Okay. Can I get you something to drink?" She paused, bit her lip. Do vampires drink anything besides blood? That's probably a rude question. He found himself genuinely smiling, something that happened rarely enough that it felt strange. "We can consume regular food and drink, though it does nothing for us nutritionally. I'll have a scotch, neat, coming right up." She poured the drink with practiced ease, sliding it across the bar. "So what brings you here? I'm guessing the King of Vampires doesn't usually hang out in dive bars on a Thursday night." "This is hardly a dive. And I wanted to check on you, make sure you've had no further trouble from my people. The guards you posted are very thorough. Also terrifying. Emma thinks they're exciting, which is exactly the kind of thing I worry about." Gwen leaned against the bar, studying him. "But yeah, we're fine. More than fine, actually. That money you gave us cleared out our debts and then some. Emma's already looking at colleges she thought she'd never be able to afford." "Good. I'm glad it's being put to proper use." A drunk human stumbled up to the bar, interrupting them, and Gwen smoothly handled him, pouring his drink and taking his payment before returning her attention to Casimir. I keep expecting to wake up and find out the last few days were some kind of stress-induced hallucination. Vampires, kings, political schemes, it all seems too insane to be real. And yet here I am, very real and sitting at your bar." She looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her eyes. "Why did you really come here tonight?" Casimir considered lying, offering some political excuse. But she had been honest with him, and he found he wanted to return the favor. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. "You interested me that night in the throne room. You were terrified but brave, surrounded by predators but unwilling to back down. It's been a long time since anyone surprised me. So I'm what, a curiosity? A funny story to tell at your next Vampire Council meeting?" "No." He said it firmly enough that she blinked. "You're someone who did something genuinely courageous to protect your family. That's worth respect, regardless of species." Gwen's expression softened. "Thank you. That's actually really sweet for an immortal king of the undead. We have our moments." She laughed, and the sound of it made something in his chest tighten. Before he could analyze that reaction, another customer called for her attention, and she moved away to serve them. Casimir nursed his scotch, watching her work, and tried to understand what exactly he was doing here. The truth was, in 300 years of existence, he'd had countless lovers but few genuine connections. His position made real intimacy nearly impossible. Everyone wanted something from the king, whether it was power, protection, or political advantage. Even among his own kind, relationships were more often strategic alliances than matters of the heart. But Gwen Ellis had no agenda. She'd been thrust into his world against her will, had gained nothing from the encounter except trauma and money she'd already put toward practical purposes. She had no reason to flatter him, no motive to seek his favor. Talking to her felt strangely normal, almost refreshing. "You're freaking out my coworkers, right?" Gwen said, returning with a grin. "They all recognize you. Half of them think you're here to shut us down for some treaty violation. Would it help if I smiled more? It might help if you looked less like a marble statue come to life. You're very—" She gestured vaguely at all of him. "Imposing. The white hair, the perfect face, the I've seen the rise and fall of civilization stare. It's a lot. Should I apologize for my appearance?" "God, no. I just mean you stand out. But I guess that's kind of the point for vampire royalty, isn't it? They fell into easy conversation between customers, talking about everything and nothing: her life as a bartender, his frustrations with court politics, her sister's dreams of becoming a doctor, his memories of the city from 100 years ago. Time slipped away until Gwen's shift ended and the club began to close. "Can I walk you home?" Casimir asked as she collected her things. Gwen hesitated, then nodded. "Sure. But fair warning, I live in a tiny apartment in a not great neighborhood. It's probably not what you're used to. I've existed for 3 centuries, Miss Ellis. I assure you, I've seen worse." The walk through the night-dark streets was surprisingly pleasant. The guards Casimir had assigned followed at a discreet distance, and he found himself genuinely enjoying Gwen's company, her observations about the city, her easy humor. She was so different from the vampires he spent his nights with: uncomplicated, direct, without the layers of manipulation and hidden agendas he'd come to expect. They reached her apartment building, a worn-down structure that had definitely seen better decades. And Gwen turned to face him. "Thank you for walking me home. And for checking on me, even though you really didn't need to." "Perhaps I wanted to," Casimir said. "Would that be so strange?" "A little, yeah. You're a king. I'm a bartender. We don't exactly run in the same circles. Maybe we should." The words were out before he could consider them, and Gwen's eyes widened. "Are you asking me out?" "I'm suggesting that I would like to see you again. In a non-official, non-life-threatening capacity." A slow smile spread across her face. "That's the weirdest way anyone's ever asked me on a date, but sure, why not? My life's already insane at this point. Tomorrow night. I work until midnight. Then I'll meet you here at 12:30. We can go somewhere quiet, away from crowds and politics." "Sounds perfect." Gwen reached out, squeezed his hand briefly, her warmth bleeding through his cool skin, and then headed inside, leaving Casimir standing on the street wondering what exactly he'd just set in motion. Over the following weeks, Casimir found himself spending more and more time in the human world, specifically in Gwen's company. They met after her shifts, walked through empty parks, talked until dawn forced him back to his underground chambers. He took her to vampire establishments where she was the only human, places where ancient beings treated her with careful courtesy because she came under the king's protection. Gwen, for her part, seemed both fascinated and overwhelmed by his world. She asked endless questions about vampire history, their laws, the delicate balance between their species. She met Lucien, who took one look at the way Casimir watched her and declared himself highly entertained by the whole situation. "You're falling for her," Lucien said one evening, catching Casimir before he left for another night with Gwen. "Don't be absurd. I've known you for 200 years, Cas. I've never seen you like this, distracted, almost happy. She's changed something in you." Casimir wanted to argue, but the truth was becoming harder to deny. Gwen had become the best part of his nights, the one thing he looked forward to in the endless routine of ruling. Her laughter, her warmth, the way she looked at him like he was just a man and not a centuries-old monster, it all drew him in deeper than he'd thought possible. The problem was, Gwen was human, mortal. In the span of his existence, her entire life would pass in the blink of an eye. Even if she felt the same attraction he did, and he thought perhaps she might, from the way her pulse raced when they stood close, what future could they possibly have? These thoughts plagued him as he made his way to her apartment one night, only to find chaos. The guards he'd posted were fighting off 3 vampires in dark clothes, and Gwen's window had been shattered from the inside. Rage, pure and cold, flooded through Casimir. He moved faster than human eyes could track, tearing into the attackers with lethal efficiency. 2 died within seconds, their hearts torn from their chests before they could even scream. The third he caught by the throat, lifting him off the ground. "Who sent you?" Casimir demanded, his eyes blazing red. "Theron," the vampire gasped. "He said you dishonored him. Taking his position, he wanted revenge. Where is Theron now?" "Gone to ground. But he has followers. Others who think you've grown weak, spending your time with a human whore." The vampire's head separated from his body before he could finish the insult, crumbling to ash. Casimir turned to his guards. "Find Theron. I don't care if you have to tear the city apart. Bring him to me alive." "Yes, Your Majesty." Casimir leaped through the shattered window into Gwen's apartment. The small space was wrecked, furniture overturned, and Gwen was backed into a corner, clutching a broken chair leg like a weapon. Blood ran from a cut on her temple, and her eyes were wild with fear. "Casimir," she breathed, relief flooding her face. He crossed to her in 2 strides, gently taking the makeshift weapon from her hands and pulling her against his chest. She was shaking, her heartbeat erratic, and his protective instincts roared at the evidence of her injury. "You're safe," he murmured against her hair. "I have you." They came through the window. said Theron sent them to teach you a lesson. Gwen's voice was muffled against his shirt. Where's Emma? Is she at school? Under guard? She's safe, they only came for you. Lucky me. She pulled back slightly, touching the cut on her head and wincing. Is it bad? Head wounds bleed more than they should. You'll need stitches. Casimir cupped her face carefully, examining the injury with clinical precision, even as every instinct screamed at him to hunt down Theron and make him suffer for harming what was his. What was his? The realization should have shocked him, but instead it felt inevitable. At some point over the last few weeks, Gwen Ellis had become his not as a possession, but as something infinitely more precious. She was the first person in centuries to see past the crown, past the power, to the man beneath. She made him feel human again, reminded him of what it meant to care about someone beyond political necessity. And Theron had tried to take her from him. Casimir? Gwen's voice broke through his dark thoughts. You're doing the scary glowing eye thing. He forced himself to calm, the red fading back to silver. Sorry, I'm just angry. Yeah, I got that from the whole ripping hearts out display outside. She managed a shaky smile. Thanks for the rescue. Always. But you can't stay here. It's not safe. Theron may send others. So what do I do? Go into hiding? Leave the city? Come to the court? Stay in my chambers under my personal protection? No one would dare attack you there. Gwen looked uncertain. That's a big step. Living in the vampire court. Your people already think I'm some kind of distraction. If I move into your place, what will they say? I don't particularly care what they say. Casimir touched her uninjured cheek gently. Gwen, these last few weeks with you have been the most genuine connection I've had in longer than I care to admit. I know this is complicated, that I'm asking you to enter a world that's dangerous and strange, but I can't protect you properly if you insist on staying in the human world. What about Emma? She can come too. There are entire wings of the palace set up for human guests and servants. She'll be safe, comfortable, and able to continue her studies. Gwen was quiet for a long moment, thinking it through. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but we need to talk about what this means, about what we are to each other. Because if I'm moving into the vampire palace, I need to know it's not just about protection. What do you want it to be? Casimir asked, his heart which rarely beat except when feeding suddenly pounding. I want it to be real, Gwen said softly. I know it's crazy. A few weeks ago I didn't even believe vampires existed, and now I'm falling for their king. But I can't help how I feel. Every night with you I just fall a little bit more. Then we're matched in our madness, Casimir said, and kissed her. It was gentle at first, mindful of her injury, but quickly deepened as weeks of tension and unspoken feelings poured out between them. Gwen's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Casimir wrapped his arms around her, careful of his strength but unable to resist the pull of her warmth, her life, her humanity. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Gwen laughed softly. Okay, that settles it. I'm definitely moving in with you. The relocation happened quickly. By the time dawn approached, Gwen and Emma had been installed in a beautiful suite of rooms adjacent to Casimir's private chambers in the underground palace. Emma was predictably excited about the whole thing, treating it like an adventure rather than the danger it represented. Gwen was more cautious, clearly overwhelmed by the opulence and the reality of living among vampires. This is insane, she murmured, looking around the sitting room with its antique furniture and priceless artwork. 3 weeks ago, I was worried about making rent. And now you're under the protection of the most powerful vampire in the city, Lucien said from the doorway, making both sisters jump. My apologies for startling you. I'm Lucien Voronov, the king's second. I remember, Gwen said. You're the one who kept giving us knowing looks. I'm perceptive, not subtle. Lucien's ancient eyes held amusement. Welcome to the Nocturne Court. I trust you'll find your accommodations satisfactory. They're incredible, also completely overwhelming. You'll adjust. Humans have lived in the palace before, though admittedly not many. Lucien glanced toward where Emma was exploring the bedrooms with wide-eyed wonder. Your sister seems to be adapting well. Emma thinks this is all exciting. She doesn't fully grasp how much danger we're in. You're not in danger here, Lucien assured her. These chambers are in the heart of the palace, guarded by Casimir's most loyal warriors. Theron would have to fight through an army to reach you. That's supposed to be comforting. It is, when you understand that no one is capable of fighting through an army of vampire warriors. Lucien moved to leave, then paused. Take care of him, Miss Ellis. He acts like he's made of stone, but even ancient hearts can break. After he left, Gwen sank onto one of the elegant sofas, trying to process everything. She'd gone from bartender to the vampire kings. What exactly? Girlfriend seemed too casual a term for whatever this was becoming. Casimir found her there an hour later, Emma having finally gone to bed in her own room, He'd changed out of his blood-splattered clothes into simple black pants and a loose white shirt, looking somehow both regal and approachable. "You should rest," he said, sitting beside her. "It's been a traumatic night. I'm too wired to sleep. Keep thinking about those vampires breaking through my window. What would have happened if you hadn't arrived when you did? Don't." His voice was rough. "Don't think about that. Hard not to." She turned to face him fully. "This is my life now, isn't it? Being a target because of my connection to you? I'll find Theron and end this threat. I swear it. And then what? There'll be someone else, another vampire who sees me as a weakness, a way to hurt you." Gwen's voice wasn't accusing, just realistic. "I need to know what I'm getting into here, Casimir. Really know." He was silent for a moment, then took her hand in his, marveling as always at how small and warm it was compared to his. "You're right. Being with me will make you a target. My enemies will see you as leverage, as a vulnerability to exploit. Life at court is dangerous even for vampires. For a human, it's exponentially more so. That's not a great sales pitch. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm being honest because you deserve the truth." Casimir met her eyes. "But I'm also promising you this: I will protect you with everything I have. My power, my resources, my life if necessary. You will be safe here because I will make it so. Because you care about me. Because I'm falling in love with you," Casimir said quietly. "I've existed for 3 centuries, Gwen. I've had lovers, companions, even marriages of political convenience. But I have never felt like this need to be near someone, this constant awareness of another person's presence in my life. You've become essential to me in a way I didn't think was possible anymore." Gwen's eyes filled with tears. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, and also the most terrifying. I have that effect." She laughed through her tears, then leaned forward to kiss him. This kiss was different from the one in her apartment, slower, deeper, filled with promise rather than desperation. When they parted, Gwen rested her forehead against his. "I'm scared," she admitted, "of this world, of how fast everything's moving, of how much I already feel for you. But I'm also happier than I've been in years. So yeah, I'm in. I'm choosing this, choosing you, even though it's insane. Then I'm the luckiest vampire alive." They spent the rest of the night talking, making plans, learning more about each other. Casimir told her about his turning 3 centuries ago, about the vampire who'd made him and then abandoned him to figure out immortality alone. Gwen shared stories about her childhood, about raising Emma after their parents died, about the struggles that had led her to bartending in the Everhart district. As dawn approached and exhaustion finally claimed Gwen, Casimir carried her to the bedroom and tucked her into the massive 4-poster bed. He should have left, retired to his own chambers where the coming daylight couldn't touch him, but instead he found himself lying beside her, watching her sleep, marveling at the impossible situation they'd fallen into. A human and a vampire, a bartender and a king. It should never work. Every logical part of his mind knew that, but his heart, cold and still for so many years, had finally woken up again, and it beat only for her. The hunt for Theron took 3 nights of intensive searching. Casimir's warriors tore through the city, following every lead, questioning every vampire who might have information. Finally, they found him hiding in an abandoned building in the Everhart district, surrounded by a dozen loyal followers. Casimir went personally to collect him. The fight was brutal but brief. Theron's followers were no match for the Vampire King's fury, and soon the former counselor stood alone, backed against a wall with Casimir's hand around his throat. "You tried to kill her," Casimir said softly. "You sent assassins to murder an innocent woman because I took your position on the council. You humiliated me," Theron spat. "Centuries of service, and you cast me aside for a human whore." Casimir's hand tightened, cutting off the insult. "Careful, Theron. I might still grant you a quick death if you show some dignity." "Kill me then. I'm not afraid of you. You should be." Casimir leaned close, his eyes blazing red. "Because I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to make an example of you. Show every vampire in this city what happens when they threaten what's mine." He dragged Theron back to the Nocturne Court, where the entire vampire nobility had been assembled. Gwen watched from a balcony overlooking the throne room, Emma beside her, both of them guarded by Lucien. Casimir had wanted to spare her this display of vampire justice, but she'd insisted on being present. "Theron Vasilis," Casimir announced, his voice carrying through the vast hall. "You stand accused of violating the blood laws, attempting to murder a human under my protection, and treason against the crown." "How do you plead?" Theron said, his voice defiant. "And I'd do it again." "You've grown weak, Casimir, soft. That human has made you forget what you are: a predator, a king, a creature of the night. You spend your time with her instead of ruling, and the court suffers for it." Murmurs rippled through the assembled vampires. some agreeing, others shocked by Theron's boldness. You think caring about someone makes me weak? Casimir stepped down from his throne, circling Theron slowly. You mistake compassion for weakness, connection for vulnerability. Yes, I care for Gwen Ellis. Yes, I have devoted time to her that I might otherwise spend on politics and power plays. But that doesn't make me less of a king, it makes me remember why I became king in the first place. He stopped in front of Theron, his gaze sweeping across all the watching vampires. 300 years ago I took this throne because I wanted to build something better than the endless violence and chaos that had come before. I wanted vampires and humans to coexist, to find a balance between our natures. The blood laws exist not to weaken us but to strengthen the treaty that keeps both our species alive and thriving. Pretty words, Theron sneered. But they don't change reality. Humans are prey. That's all they'll ever be. Then you don't belong in my court. Casimir's voice went cold. The sentence for your crimes is exile. You will be stripped of your vampire status, cast out from our society, forbidden from ever entering vampire territory again. Any vampire who aids you will face the same punishment. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Exile was considered worse than death for many vampires. To be cut off from their own kind, forced to exist alone in the world, was a fate most feared above all else. You can't do that, Theron said, his defiance finally cracking. Casimir, please, I can and I have. Casimir gestured and guards seized Theron. Get him out of my sight. As Theron was dragged away, still protesting, Casimir addressed his court. Let this be understood by all present, the human Gwen Ellis is under my protection. Any vampire who harms her, threatens her, or even speaks ill of her will answer to me personally. She is mine and I am hers, and that is the end of the matter. The proclamation sent another ripple through the crowd, but this time no one dared to voice disagreement. Casimir's display of power and his clear devotion to the human had made his position unmistakable. After the assembly ended and the throne room cleared, Gwen came down from the balcony to meet him. She looked shaken but resolute. That was intense, she said. Also kind of terrifying. I'm sorry you had to witness it. Vampire justice isn't pretty. No, but it was necessary, and thank you for what you said about why you care for me. I know it can't be easy, declaring your feelings in front of your entire court. Casimir pulled her close, not caring who might still be watching. I want no one to doubt where my loyalties lie. You are mine, Gwen. My partner, my love, my choice. Let them all see it. She kissed him softly. Yours. I liked the sound of that. The weeks that followed were a period of adjustment. Gwen continued working at midnight. She refused to become dependent on Casimir's wealth, insisted on maintaining some independence, but she spent her nights at the palace, learning to navigate vampire society. Emma threw herself into her studies, tutored by some of the older, more scholarly vampires who found teaching a human girl surprisingly entertaining. The relationship between Gwen and Casimir deepened, moving beyond the initial rush of attraction into something more substantial. They learned each other's rhythms, their likes and dislikes, the small intimacies that build true partnership. Casimir found himself more content than he'd been in centuries, and even the court had to admit that he seemed sharper, more focused, as if Gwen's presence balanced him in some fundamental way. It was 2 months into their relationship when Lucien appeared in Casimir's chambers one evening with urgent news. We found her, he said without preamble. The real Genevieve Everhart. Casimir looked up from the reports he'd been reviewing, startled. You're certain? DNA confirmed. She's been living in a small town 3 hours north of here, raised by human parents who adopted her as an infant. They had no idea what she was. Does she know now? Our agents approached her carefully. She's confused, understandably, but willing to come to the city and learn more about her heritage. This should have been good news, the solution to the Everhart territory problem they'd been seeking for months. But Casimir felt a strange unease. When will she arrive? Tomorrow night. After Lucien left, Casimir sought out Gwen, finding her in the library with Emma. They were both reading, a peaceful domestic scene that made his chest tighten with unexpected emotion. Can we talk? He asked Gwen quietly. She looked up, immediately reading his serious expression. Emma, I'll be back in a bit. They walked to his private chambers, and Casimir explained about Genevieve's discovery. Gwen listened carefully, then frowned. That's good news, right? It solves the territory problem, gives legitimacy to whoever you put in charge. Yes, it does. So why do you look worried? Casimir ran a hand through his white hair. The counselors who tried to install you as a fake heiress chose you because you resembled Genevieve. If the resemblance is strong enough to fool vampires at a distance, what does that mean when the real woman arrives? Understanding dawned in Gwen's eyes. You're worried people will bring up the whole situation again, remind everyone of the scandal. I'm worried it will make things uncomfortable for you. The court has just begun to accept our relationship. Having Genevieve here, a constant reminder of how we met, could complicate matters. Gwen moved closer, taking his hands in hers. Casimir, I'm not afraid of complications. Yes, it'll be weird when she arrives, especially if we do look similar, but none of that changes what we have. I'm not going anywhere. You're remarkably brave for someone so breakable, she laughed. That's the sweetest insult I've ever received. Genevieve Everhart arrived the following evening, escorted by Lucien and flanked by guards. Casimir received her in a private chamber rather than the throne room, wanting to keep the meeting low-key until they understood the situation better. The moment she entered, Gwen, who had insisted on being present, drew in a sharp breath. The resemblance was indeed striking. Genevieve had the same build, similar features, though her skin was slightly paler and her eyes a different shade of brown. She could easily have been Gwen's sister. Your Majesty, Genevieve said, executing a nervous curtsy. Thank you for inviting me to court. Thank you for coming, Casimir replied gently. I imagine this has all been quite overwhelming. That's putting it mildly. A week ago I was a waitress in a town nobody's heard of. Now I'm apparently some kind of vampire heiress? She laughed nervously. It's a lot to process, I can only imagine. This is Gwen Ellis, my partner. She's been helping me navigate the complexities of the Everhart situation. Genevieve's eyes widened as she looked at Gwen. Wow, they weren't kidding about the resemblance. Are we related somehow? Not that we know of, Gwen said. Just a strange coincidence that caused some problems a few months back. Over the next hour, they explained the situation to Genevieve, the attempt to install a fake heiress, the territory crisis, the current state of vampire-human relations. She listened with growing amazement, asking intelligent questions that suggested a quick mind beneath the overwhelmed surface. So you want me to take over my family's territory? She finally asked. Even though I know nothing about vampire culture or politics, we want to give you that option, Casimir corrected. With proper training and support, you could become a strong leader. Your bloodline gives you legitimacy, and your human upbringing gives you unique insight into managing a district where both species coexist. And if I don't want that responsibility, then we'll find another solution. You're not obligated to claim your inheritance. Genevieve thought about it, then slowly nodded. Can I have some time to learn about this world before I decide? Maybe spend a few months here at court, see what vampire life is really like? Of course, you're welcome to stay as long as you need. As Genevieve was shown to her quarters, Gwen turned to Casimir with a thoughtful expression. She seems nice, overwhelmed, but handling it well. She does. Though I suspect the next few months will be challenging for her. For all of us, Gwen agreed. The court's going to have a field day with this, the fake heiress and the real one, both living in the palace. She was right. Over the following weeks, the vampire nobility whispered constantly about the situation. Some found it amusing, others scandalous. A few traditionalists even suggested that Casimir should have chosen Genevieve over Gwen, that a relationship with the Everhart heiress would have been more politically advantageous. But Casimir ignored the gossip, focused instead on helping Genevieve adjust while maintaining his relationship with Gwen. It was a delicate balance, especially as Genevieve proved to have a natural aptitude for vampire politics. She was charming, quick to learn, and unexpectedly diplomatic qualities that made her popular among the court. The crisis came 3 months after Genevieve's arrival. Casimir was in a council meeting when guards burst in with urgent news there had been an attack on the Everhart territory. A group of rogue vampires had raided a human neighborhood, killing indiscriminately and threatening the treaty. Where's Gwen? Casimir demanded, his first thought for her safety. At the club working her shift, Lucien said. She's in the Everhart district. Cold fear flooded through Casimir. Send guards to retrieve her immediately. And assemble our warriors. We're ending this tonight. The battle was brutal. The rogue vampires had fortified themselves in an abandoned warehouse, holding human hostages and daring the king to come for them. Casimir obliged, leading the assault personally with a fury born of both righteous anger and protective terror. He found Gwen being held with other hostages from the club, a knife at her throat held by a vampire who looked young but radiated ancient malice. One more step and she dies, the rogue warned. Casimir froze, every instinct screaming at him to attack, to tear this creature apart for daring to touch what was his. But Gwen's life hung in the balance, and he forced himself to think tactically. What do you want? He asked. Recognition. The Everhart territory has been ungoverned for too long. We claim it by right of strength. Acknowledge our rule and we'll let these humans go. The Everhart territory has a rightful heir. Your claim is invalid. The little half-blood girl you've been training? The rogue laughed. She's barely vampire. She has no right to lead. She has every right. But this isn't a negotiation. Casimir's eyes began to glow. Release the hostages, surrender yourselves to my justice, and I'll grant you quick deaths. Refuse, and I'll make your final moments last centuries. The rogue pressed the knife harder against Gwen's throat, drawing blood. I said he never finished. Gwen, who had been carefully loosening his grip while he focused on Casimir, suddenly twisted in his arms and drove her elbow into his throat. The knife clattered away, and Casimir moved, crossing the space between them faster than human eyes could track. The rogue vampire died before he could even scream. The remaining rogues were dispatched quickly, and the hostages were freed. Casimir pulled Gwen against him, checking her injury, a shallow cut, already clotting. You scared me, he said roughly. Sorry. Figured I should do something instead of playing damsel in distress. You're impossible. You love it. He kissed her, tasting her blood on his lips and feeling the familiar pull of bloodlust war with his love for her. But control won, as it always did with her. She was too precious to risk, too important to his existence. Marry me, he said suddenly. Gwen pulled back, staring at him. What? Marry me. Bond with me. Let me make this official in every way that matters to both our kinds. Casimir cupped her face gently. I know it's complicated. I know the age difference is literally centuries, and you'd be tying yourself to a vampire king with all the political nightmares that entails. But I love you, Gwen. I want everyone to know you're mine, now and forever. In case you forgot, I'm human. I'll age and die while you stay exactly like this. Then I'll cherish every moment we have, every year, every day, every breath you take. I'll love you through your mortality and mourn you for the rest of my immortality. His voice was fierce, absolute. But I'd rather have 50 years with you than an eternity without you. Tears streamed down Gwen's face. That's the most beautiful and most depressing thing anyone's ever said to me. Is that a yes? Yes, you ridiculous vampire. Yes, I'll marry you. The wedding took place a month later, a blend of vampire and human traditions that created something entirely unique. It was held at night in the grand hall of the Nocturne Court, witnessed by both species. Emma stood as Gwen's maid of honor, Lucien as Casimir's best man. Genevieve attended as an honored guest, having formally accepted her role as heir to the Everhart territory and proven herself a capable leader in training. Gwen wore white, a gown of antique lace that made her look like she'd stepped out of a Gothic fairy tale. Casimir wore black, elegant and severe, his white hair falling loose over his shoulders. They exchanged vows that promised love, protection, and partnership across the divide of mortality and immortality. When Casimir kissed his new wife, the assembled court erupted in applause, vampire and human alike, celebrating a union that symbolized everything the treaty was meant to achieve. The reception lasted until dawn, when the vampires retreated to their light-proof chambers, and the humans headed home. Gwen and Casimir retired to his chambers, now officially their chambers, and fell into bed exhausted and deliriously happy. Mrs. Drăculești, Casimir murmured against her hair. It has a nice ring to it. I'm keeping Ellis professionally, Gwen said. But yeah, I like it too. Any regrets about marrying the most powerful vampire in the city who literally ripped hearts out to protect me? No, I think I'm good. He laughed, the sound genuine and free. I love you, Gwen. I love you too, Casimir, my vampire king. The years that followed were not without challenges. Gwen continued to age while Casimir remained unchanging, a reality they both had to accept, but they filled their time together with love, with purpose, with the careful building of a life that bridged two worlds. Emma graduated high school, then university, eventually becoming a doctor who specialized in vampire human physiology. Genevieve proved to be an exceptional leader, transforming the Everhart territory into a model of cooperation between species. The treaty strengthened, vampire-human relations improved, and the Nocturne Court flourished under Casimir's steady rule. Through it all, Gwen remained his anchor, his connection to humanity, his reminder of why he'd fought so hard to build a better world. She worked at midnight until she was 40, then transitioned to managing it, eventually owning it outright. She became a voice for human rights in vampire territory, respected by both species for her intelligence, her courage, and her unwavering integrity. Casimir loved her more with each passing year, each line that appeared on her face, each gray hair that threaded through the dark curls. She was beautiful to him in ways that transcended physical appearance, the beauty of a life well lived, of kindness and strength combined, of love that deepened rather than faded with time. When Gwen was 73, weak with an illness that no amount of money or vampire medicine could cure, Casimir held her in their bed and asked the question he'd been dreading for decades. Do you want me to turn you? I could save you, give you eternity. Gwen, still sharp-minded despite her body's failing, smiled at him. We talked about this, remember? When we first got married, I remember. But that was abstract then. This is real now, and my answer is the same. I don't want to be a vampire, Casimir. I've lived a full, amazing, impossibly beautiful human life. I got to see Emma become a doctor. I got to watch Genevieve become a queen in her own right. I got to spend 50 years married to you, which is about 49 more than I ever thought I'd have with anyone. I'm not ready to lose you. I know, my love. But you'll survive it. You survived 300 years before me. You'll survive centuries after. It won't be the same. No, she agreed, touching his face gently. But you'll carry me with you. And maybe someday, a few centuries from now, you'll meet someone else who makes you remember what it means to be alive. And I want you to let yourself love them, okay? Don't spend eternity mourning me. How can I promise that? Because I'm asking you to. Because I love you and want you to be happy, even after I'm gone. Gwen's eyes were serious. Promise me, Casimir. Promise you'll keep living, keep loving, keep being the man I fell in love with. I promise, he said, the words torn from him. But there will never be anyone like you. Good, I'd hate to be easily replaced. She smiled, then grew tired, her breathing shallow. I love you. I have loved you since the night you saw through their scheme and chose honesty over politics. And I will love you in whatever comes after this. I love you, Gwen, forever. She died peacefully in his arms as the sun rose, her last breath a sigh of contentment. Casimir held her as the morning light crept across the floor, stopping just short of their bed, and felt the ancient heart in his chest break into pieces. The funeral was attended by hundreds of vampires and humans alike who had known Gwen, loved her, respected her. Emma gave a eulogy that celebrated her sister's courage, her kindness, her absolute refusal to be cowed by a world that should have terrified her. Genevieve spoke about the example Gwen had set, showing that humans and vampires could not just coexist but genuinely love one another. Casimir stood silent throughout, his grief too deep for words. In the months after, he threw himself into ruling with renewed intensity, channeling his pain into purpose. He expanded human vampire educational programs, established medical research facilities, studying how the two species could better help each other, and created scholarships in Gwen's name for humans studying vampire culture and vice versa. Emma visited regularly, understanding that Casimir needed connection to Gwen's family to process his grief. They would talk for hours about Gwen, sharing memories, keeping her alive through stories. Gradually, the sharp edge of pain dulled to a constant ache, bearable if never gone. 5 years after Gwen's death, on what would have been their 55th wedding anniversary, Casimir stood at her grave in the Vampire Court's private cemetery. It was night, stars bright overhead, and he held a single white rose, her favorite. I kept my promise, he said softly to the headstone. I'm still here, still ruling, still trying to build the world you believed in. Emma's doing well. She just opened a new clinic. Genevieve's territory is thriving. Everything you helped build continues to grow. He knelt, placing the rose on her grave. I miss you. Every night, every moment. But you were right, I'm surviving. And maybe someday I'll even learn to fully live again. A breeze stirred his white hair, warm despite the night chill, and Casimir imagined it was her, telling him she was proud, telling him to keep going. He stayed there until dawn approached, talking to her memory, feeling the connection that death couldn't sever. Then he rose, straightened his jacket, and walked back toward the palace. The work of ruling awaited, the endless responsibilities of a vampire king. But underneath it all, he carried Gwen Ellis with him, the bartender who had become a queen, the human who had taught a vampire to love, the woman who had changed his eternal existence in the span of a single mortal lifetime. And somewhere in the eternal night, he could have sworn he heard her laughter, felt her warmth, sensed her absolute certainty that this connection, this love, this impossibility that had become reality was worth every moment of the joy and the grief it brought. He would love her forever, his Gwen. And he would live, as she'd asked, honoring her memory by being the man she'd believed him to be. The vampire king walked into the darkness of his palace, carrying the light of her love within him, and knew that whatever eternity held, he had been blessed by the brief, beautiful intersection of their lives. And that was enough.